Yes, this is Alan with the Rentham Barbarians.
Oh, this is Chris. I am the rugby dad in Massachusetts.
And I am Daniel. I'm with the Barbarians also.
Jeff Karras, fighting Cohogs of Rhode Island. I'm a rugby dad, I'm a coach, and I'm also an administrator.
And this is Kate McCabe, and I am with Belmont High School Rugby.
I'm Skylar, and I am alive.
Okay, so moving forward, so the topic, as we said, is sports that help rugby, or maybe that are helped by rugby. We'll see. We'll see where the discussion goes here. Does anybody want to get us going?
Yeah, I guess one thing that we were kind of talking about in the setup to thinking about other sports that kids play or can play and should play was really what sports did we play that kind of brought us into athletics and potentially laid some groundwork for rugby. And so I guess as a little kid, I'm sure I, like everyone, played a lot of different sports, but the two that I loved the most were soccer and volleyball. And I'm sure that other people are going to talk about soccer. So I'll just say that the thing that I really appreciate or loved about volleyball was that you are always reacting and then setting up a plan for the next piece. So it's a constant conversation on the court. And I feel like that piece of communication is very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, good point. I think we can find some value in all sports, and probably some more than others. I'll just call it the two sports that I played more than any others when I was growing up was baseball and hockey. And I think we'd probably be quick to write baseball off, but we'd also remember that that sport's the sport that I learned to run and to throw and to catch and to and to give 100% when you have to give 100%. So while while a lot of the skills in baseball may be not directly applicable to rugby, the point is that a kid that's out there playing baseball is learning skills that's transferable to every sport, including rugby. But you're still catching and you're still passing and you're still running. Those are some core skills in rugby. Hockey, interestingly, doesn't have those core skills, but I think most of us would say more directly relatable to, right? I think one of the keys to hockey is space. It's fast moving game, much more faster moving, but it still has some similar concepts. You're trying to defend against somebody scoring in your end. You're trying to score against the other team in their end. And there are offsides lines, there are set pieces, but so there's a lot of strategy that I think is directly applicable. But on the other hand, the tactics are the actual skill sets about shooting and passing are not the same. But yet I'd say if I had to pick between the two, soccer and hockey, I would say hockey would be preparing you for rugby more so than baseball.
So yeah, then from my side, growing up in England, I mean, soccer was mandatory. There's no, I think, kid who's been to school in England who hasn't been forced to play soccer at some level. And then in the summer, cricket was the summer sport for boys. So they were the two sports I played. I struggled to see the connections between cricket and rugby, other than it was the same people I played with on the rugby team who played on a cricket team. And but soccer, I guess, I mean, going down one layer down from where Kate started, I'm sure Skylar will add more insight. To me, it's a constant motion game. You got to keep moving. It gets a little slow in places, but even when it's slow, you're still looking to pass the ball for tactical gain. And in that respect, there's a lot of similarity with rugby. There are times when it gets slow, but you start moving the ball for tactical gain, and it's not always immediately apparent that what you're going to do is an obvious attack coming straight out of it. But by making the effort to keep the ball alive, keep the ball moving, communicating with your teammates, you actually end up, creating holes and being able to go through and attack from there. So soccer has some similarities in that respect, from my perspective at least.
Well, I mean, and watching the South Americans play.
Well, yeah, well, I think with the South Americans, you can see the way they kick a rugby ball looks like they're kicking a soccer ball, but it's been thumped so hard it's become elongated.
Well, I think that's the thing that's both common to hockey and to soccer. They both take some time to understand the flow of the play, and so you show somebody who's never really seen a hockey game before, and they're looking for the excitement. They're looking to see what's going to happen. But if the game will be 2-0 after an hour, just like in soccer. But it can be very entertaining if you understand the flow and you see what's going on, you see what they're trying to do on each side, and how they're doing matchups and all those types of things. And so I think watching soccer, although I'm not a big soccer fan, never was, but I get sucked into it just like I get sucked into watching a hockey game because you see the art of the flow, and I think that's also what is really neat about rugby. There is a flow to it, and there is phasing and those types of things that are very unlike baseball or football, that are much more direct and much more um, risk reward payoff stop, you know, or loss. And very evident what's going on at each step, and it's very episodic but sequential. And I think rugby and soccer and hockey are all very, very nonlinear, and in time in particular. That there are patterns and there's play and there's flow that you have to be pretty experienced to understand. I still don't understand that much about the flow of rugby, and I'm still learning from a guy like Coach Humphrey and Ed Hendricken, who played his whole life as a Welsh guy, and I understand why he's doing what he's doing, and the light bulb comes on, and I understand more about what I'm watching over time. And it's it's the kind of thing that American players just don't get. And maybe playing, we talk about the skills that some of these sports bring, but I think it's also the mental skill or the mental conditioning that you have to understand the game and to play the game at that level. In a different kind of game that rugby is than most American kids play.
I think Jeff, you made a really, really insightful comment there about soccer and hockey and rugby union, and I'm not emphasize union for now
Right.
because I'll come back to the second. Have a lot in common in their continuous play aspect, and I think that has a lot of pitching to the parents, health benefits and things like that to get the kids playing. Whereas football is episodal, I think you said, which is a great choice of words. Reminds me a lot of rugby league.
Yeah.
Which so what's fascinating about that is, a little bit off topic, is watching rugby league players trying to transition to rugby union and how long that takes.
Yep.
And yet the two sports are only 150 years old. They have exactly the same roots. And they really separated, not so long ago in the great grand scheme of things. But someone who plays rugby league all their life really has a lot of work to do to start playing rugby union. Exactly the way you described it, Jeff.
Yeah.
It's a great thought.
Yeah, and I could not agree with that more. I grew up in Mexico when I came to the United States, and I think I enjoy watching the the dynamic type sports where there's a lot of opportunities for each player to express themselves to the nth degree of their capabilities and abilities, and it's also very opportunistic type sports if they are flowing that way. So yeah, I appreciate golf and curling and all those sports, but I think the ones that really capture me, as you guys mentioned, is soccer. So I grew up in Mexico, so soccer was a religion in Mexico, Latin America. Yeah, we in Mexico play a very distinct type of soccer. When I came to the United States, I was in the United States. I wanted to be American, so what was more American than American football? I turned it on, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And I'll tell you, the first sport that meant anything to me as a spectator, but I couldn't really play it, was basketball. I played with with my school in the local league, and I really enjoyed it. And it wasn't until years later that I realized that I tried soccer, but soccer in the United States was different than I was used to. It didn't feel I don't know, maybe it just reminded me of the loss that I had from leaving Mexico. And basketball was like the perfect surrogate. It was, you go from offense to defense. If you manage to play great defense, the ball bounces your way. If you're very opportunistic, you make something happen. That's always extremely exciting when you're able to do that. And if you can, if you could do a couple moves and juke the players, your defense, when you have the ball, even more to it. It plays to the beautiful sport that is soccer. So for me, it was soccer, then basketball. I didn't spend a lot of time there, and then I tried to do football in high school, and I mean it was neat. I got to flatten people, um, but it was good. It was good, and then I saw these kids playing this crazy sport across the field from the soccer field, from the football field. I went over there, I joined Sevens, and I just never looked back. It had everything that I was looking for. It had everything in soccer that I enjoyed. It had everything in basketball that I enjoyed. Um, and that dynamic feel of you never know when you're going to go from offense to defense, and if you could do a great counterattack moment's notice, you are dangerous. And that is so exhilarating. I really enjoy that. So for me, those were the sports that I played, and that sort of I saw myself sort of transitioning into rugby without realizing. And once rugby was there, I didn't want to do anything else. I did do other things just for fun because there was no rugby season, and then I did do some other sports that sort of I felt were going to help me do rugby better. Was very driven and young and very driven and very fit, but not so much now. But yeah,
So it was a few weeks ago then, Daniel. Yeah.
right. Oh yeah, absolutely. You kidding me? Yeah. So I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with those, and obviously the team aspect of it. The solo sports. Hey man, I've seen a lot of great players come to Providence. I played with Providence men, come to Providence from a wrestling background, but those like in your head solo sports, but you're part of a team. I don't get them. If I'm not on the field with folks, if I don't feel like camaraderie, if I don't feel like I'm there to work with you, I would be terrible at this individual sport. I am terrible at the individual sports. I don't have the drive to better myself. I'll be honest.
So the individual sport and the wrestling side of things was interesting. I
Mhm.
also studied judo as a kid,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of value from something like judo or I didn't do wrestling, but from what I understand from wrestlers, there's a lot of value, particularly as a forward, you get for rugby. The whole idea of balance, of controlling your opponent's balance, like taking it away when you want to, the secondary part of not using brute strength on brute strength, because that just gets you hurt, and letting their strength undo them. But if you think about the average flanker, we have no flankers on this call as far as I'm aware, do we, Kate, Chris? When you're going into that breakdown, it's you versus the other person arriving at the ruck. It's a solo
Yeah.
sport for a
Yep.
few seconds, and it's all about who can establish that first beachhead
Mhm.
of being in balance. And if you look at the way it's refereed today, it's being there immediately in balance, supporting your own weight with hands on the ball, lifting the ball. And if you can get there first and create that slight advantage, then you're already in the driver's seat from that point on. And at that moment, it switches from being you versus the other person to a team game as you clear the
And
ball out and then connect with everybody else. So I think there's opportunities in both.
I think one of the things that wrestlers bring to the table is that they are quick. They are strong and they are quick. So quick with their hands, quick with their feet, quick getting to their feet. We had a kid at Hendricken who was an All-American high school wrestler, and I've seen that guy just go up to a guy who was a football player was trying to juke him, and he just made two quick steps, grabbed the ball, and ran away because his hands and feet were so fast. He just stole the ball from the runner without ever having to tackle him and surprise the kid. But all the coaches were watching him do that, and it's nothing that you would ever coach. It's nothing you would ever tell the kid to do. But as a wrestler, he understood what that kid was going to do with his body. He understood he wasn't holding the ball tightly, and he knew he could be quicker. And he just grabbed the ball and ran away with it. It's the most amazing thing I ever saw, but it was pure wrestling because they have to be quick with their hands to get in position to to get the leverage and have to be quick with their feet to shift their weight around and to gain advantage on the other guy.
I seem to recall Skylar doing that to a wrestler in middle school from my club. He was running up with the ball, and somehow, next thing he knew, he was stunned that this girl stole the ball from him and disappeared up the field. It was his very first game for us. It was a very, very good lesson to everything you've just said, Jeff, about learning how to get your hands on the ball and control it properly and being ready. It was a great education.
I remember that game, actually. I scored off of that play.
More than likely. It was miserable and wet. And actually, it was down in Rhode Island. It was in Newport. Really, really miserable, wet day in Fort Adams. Very enjoyable.
One thing
Every spring.
one thing that I like about, kind of soccer, but a lot of like larger team sports in some ways. And I'm not really thinking about football here. Is the lack of specialization of players. Even though soccer players have positions, everyone attacks, everyone defends, everyone passes and moves to space. And the same is kind of true. I mean, like there again, there's attack and defense, and there are roles in a hockey team or a basketball team. And the better you get, the more specialized certain roles get. But at the offset, like everyone is playing off of each other. And that seems very applicable to rugby in a lot of ways. Yes, there are positions, but your positions might change at every given weekend, and you might move around. You have to be able to adapt on the field and also like within your roles. So I think there's some value in that in certain team sports.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's one of the things I've always loved about rugby is the fact that you could be, and more so today than ever, you could be a prop. And next thing you know, ball's in your hands, the line's in front of you, off you go, dude. You're going to score a try for us. And there aren't many sports where a person is picked for their size and their mass and their strength, and then has the opportunity to turn things around. But in a way, I think rugby does. And I mean, we're slightly off topic in terms of some of the values, but some of the virtues of rugby. But I've always thought it was one of the greatest things about the sport is that you can be whatever size you are, and we have a position for you on the rugby field. I mean, as a kid growing up watching soccer, we knew that everybody who was 6'5" would make the soccer team, and if you were 6'6", you made the rowing team. And if you were 5 foot, you could cox for the rowing team. But between 5 foot and 6'5", don't know what sport you're going to play.
Yeah, so, there's a role for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I will say that when I coached in
no
college,
doubt about it. We could do it.
Parts about rugby is that there's always there's a spot for everyone.
Well, in 15s and 7s, you kind of need the fast kids.
Yeah, true.
Well, sevens is a specialized case of rugby, though, isn't it? I mean,
exactly.
Sevens was always the summer fun for the backs who were stuck, treading in the mud for months on end as the forwards slugged it out in the warmth. Yeah, and so come April, when the fields were drying up, the forwards got a chance to go sit in the cool, and the backs got to run around for a little bit.
And you know what?
Things have changed a little bit.
Right, and I agree with that. And as much as sevens is a specialized, sub game, a different version of 15s rugby that I think we were talking about earlier, I think many of the things we were talking about still apply. When I coached in college, whenever we got basketball players or soccer players, I was very happy because I knew that they were going to soak up the sport very, very quickly. Whenever we got, and I'm not knocking on American football in any way. I think there's a lot of space for American football and rugby to help one another. But I think the fundamental sort of structure of the sport is very different between the two. And I knew which areas the football players were going to have a hard time in. And rugby being a very dynamic sport, I immediately knew how it is that I needed to pull these football players aside and discuss with them where the areas that I think they really do need to become aware and try to build into like the knowing what they were where they were going to have a hard time picking up the sport itself. But yeah, something like soccer, something like basketball, those dynamic sports, team sports, I think those translate very very well. And as we were saying earlier, um, karate, judo and wrestling, and I think even in sevens, all those they're gonna transition well into those sports as opposed to some of the other very individual sports, swimming, equestrian, golf,
Actually, can I touch those? I mean, again, I was never taught football growing up, and it wasn't on television, so I only watched it when I was much, much older. But there are a couple of skills I've seen in football that are just really well. There's one skill that's really started to emerge in rugby now that wasn't there 40 years ago. That seems a real common skill in football, and that's catching a kick ball away from your body, not in the, as we would call it, the breadbasket. But like catching a ball over your head or something like that. And I see kids do it now, and I cringe when I see it, because we'd have been reamed out by our coaches for taking such a high risk catch, and yet they do it consistently, and they all play football. So I'm sure it's a football skill, and I see European commentators comment on it as being like an Aussie rules form of catching, but again, there's not a lot of Aussie rules going on in the US, but again, the kids seem to pick that skill up. And the other one, kind of twofold. I mean, with lineouts, I mean, again, when we were growing up, it was always kind of that, slightly dubious throw. But if you look at the role of the quarterback and the precision that's expected of quarterbacks today when they're throwing the ball in, the precision that's expected of lineouts is about the same nowadays. Though over a much smaller range, you've only got 15 meters. Typically, you're going to throw the ball. So I think that's another football skill that does translate into rugby. And again, I see many American kids have a much better throwing skill set than I saw back home when I was growing up, just because they're used to seeing it and they're used to doing it. And they probably mucked around throwing footballs everywhere. And just because the ball's bigger doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be fundamentally harder. So I think straight away those two skills are directly translatable from football. And of course, there's things we can bring to them. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there's also an interesting, I mean, I unfortunately don't have any girls that come into the program having played American football. But it is one of those sports that when I see the boys transition into the boys team, and when I see girls that come in from, I think basketball and hockey and even soccer to some extent, that are fearless, like there's that approach the contacty parts of that game. Because each one of those has a part. I mean, obviously football in a way, but hockey and soccer each have contact points. And so it's like sometimes the kids that come in that aren't even the most skilled in those sports, but that have that mentality in those other sports come in and excel at rugby. And then I've even had kids that have come in and played rugby and like as a freshman, and then gone back to their regular, their other sports in the fall and the winter. And their coaches have been like, oh my gosh, they are such better players, like such better soccer players or hockey players, because they're not afraid of anyone, like understand their bodies better. So there's an interesting point to that too.
Yeah, good point. I even extend it to just life. Right. You're just better at just, physical interaction with others, or just your confidence going into anything, even if it's an argument or another conversation.
So
I like that. We should put that on a t-shirt. Rugby makes you better at life.
But you need to spell life incorrectly for it to be correct, though, doesn't it? Makes you better at life. That was one of my favorite T-shirts of all time. Was the guy who was with us right at the early days of Rentham used to have a T-shirt which says, education is important, but rugby is importanter.
Importanter.
I've seen that one.
I've seen that. That's great. So I'm going to reach into the obscure sports, and this is something that my high school coach sort of had us do for tackling, and it was It was a sport of kabaddi, Kabaddi. I'm actually going to show it on the screen. So I'm going to transition and show my screen. I don't know much about the sport. I'm probably completely wrong in what it is that I know. I did a Wikipedia search for it, and I guess it's sort of a provincial sport from India, where you try to infiltrate into the other team's half of the field or their field, and then depending on how far you go in and make it back, you get points. So if you go past a certain line, I think you get 1 point. Past another line, you get like 2 or 3 points. And then if somebody touches you, you get additional points for getting touches from other players if you get back. And the way you neutralize that player is by tackling them to the ground. So basically, that was our tackling practice, and it was a lot of fun. Um, it was we didn't do it very often because it's not perfectly applicable to rugby. But I think as a coach, looking for fun and interesting ways of being able to keep the kids engaged. We had a lot of fun with that. It was really neat, and it was nobody ever got hurt or anything. It was just surprising because at times it was kind of a mob. Everybody just dogpiling on one person. But I don't remember anybody ever getting hurt from it in any way. Not even like a bloody nose or anything, but it was a lot of fun. So if you've ever played it, or if there's a local kabaddi league in your town, and you want to brushen up or keep your skills in tackling, that might be a sport you want to look into. And have you guys ever seen it? Have you guys seen any? Are familiar with it in any way?
No.
No.
I'm only to the extent that you've showed us, you showed me, Daniel.
Yeah,
So,
same
but
for me.
there is a funny comment here. Somebody mentioned it's like Capture the Flag. It absolutely is like Capture the Flag, except for it's a tackle version of Capture the Flag, which I can imagine why that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, in a way.
That sounds like something I would like.
Oh, look it up. Look it up. I'll post it onto show notes and take a look at it. It really is. It's a very fun little thing, and it's really just sort of an organized. As you do different tackling drills, the one where the two kids are facing each other and you call red or blue, and one dashes in one direction versus the other. So it's running somebody down and tackling from behind, which is fairly safe to do. This is just another way of doing the exact same thing. So if there's a kabaddi league and you want to keep your hone in your tackling drills, tackling skills, definitely join it, because it's a fun sport.
And are there many of those leagues in North America, Daniel?
I've never heard of it. It took me a long time to even find the name of the sport. I remember I used to do it with Ian, but I just thought it was one of his silly little drills that he did. I'm not sure how in the world I actually came across finding out that it was a sport, an actual sport.
Yeah, well, it
One of
sounds
the,
like there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, so on a similar topic, one of the coaches I talked to back in the UK, currently coaching youth leagues, was saying that he introduces contact with sumo wrestling. So he gets the kids to do sumo wrestling just so they get used to making contact with each other and moving their bodies around against other bodies as well. So again, probably not such a huge popular sport amongst the youth of today, but another one that could maybe help us on the rugby field.
That is brilliant. Oh my God, that is because you're controlling the velocity that the kids are going at each other, because you're starting in front of each other, right? And you're just trying to shove each other out of a circle.
Yeah, basically, but his motivation was quite different to some of ours, and it's interesting. It plays into Kate's comment about body confidence in the contact area.
Yep.
He was telling me the biggest challenge he faces with the young kids in the UK, and we are talking 9, 10, 11-year-olds, is whilst they're not frightened of wrestling each other and roughhousing, contact in a rugby environment is something they seem to be more timid about. And so he has to amp them up to get them in to be confident enough to be tackling well, which means that he doesn't have the same challenges of safe tackling that we face over here. He has other challenges for safe tackling, which is kids being too timid, whereas we have how to calm that guided missile down so no one gets hurt.
Yep.
And teach people not to shoulder charge.
Well, he has to teach them to shoulder charge, which is probably why Owen Farrell got so good at it. He had a really excellent coach early in his career, if that's where you're going, Skylar. But yeah, no, so it's different. But remember, actually, that's a good point. Owen Farrell was brought up playing rugby league. It's a totally different sport. But anyway, but no, so it's different challenges. Thank you.
So, another one, probably also an obscure sport for Americans, but not at all in Ireland, is Gaelic football, right? So that's huge in Ireland, and you see that at the professional and international level in Ireland, we have a lot of athletes that transferred from Gaelic football, which most kids grow up playing in Ireland, and that's a sport that has a lot of good transferable skills, and you can see them on display. In Ireland, and we do have leagues in America. They may not be in abundance like the other sports, but there is Gaelic football available in America.
Certainly in Boston, that's for sure.
Yeah, I like that one.
You like Gaelic football? Do you have any thoughts about in playing Gaelic football about skills that are most transferable?
I mean, I just like that you get points for getting it in the net and over the crossbar.
It just increases your scoring opportunity for inaccuracy. Or do you have to do both at the same time?
No, you get 1 point for over the bar, and then 3 if you get it in the net. Which means I get lots and lots and lots of 1-pointers.
From distance.
Yeah. So I mean, so kicking 4 points is one thing, but also, I mean, there's a lot of similar running. Yeah, you're practicing your quick taps. There's of course there's space, right? A similar amount of space, a similar position. So that's
I think it's got the right number of people in the field too.
Yeah, I was about to say
rugby.
that. Yeah. Right, you are. And go ahead.
I was just thinking, interesting question would be, in addition to like what kinds of sports are you hoping that players are playing? Like, let's say you're a coach, you're an athlete, you have an athlete, and they have, the desire to pick up another sport, or they're like, I don't know what to do this fall. I'm thinking about playing what I want to play. Like, what are some sports that you wish more rugby players would take up in the off seasons?
Yeah, perfect question.
Judo and wrestling, anything that gets them lots of aerobic exercise with my kind of top list. Hand skills as well, actually. Good, just calm, controlled hands on the ball. So actually, you mentioned volleyball earlier, Kate. I played a little bit of that as a kid, but I don't work out how much translated into rugby other than the general team play and, to your point earlier on, reacting and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would say it's certainly not an aerobic activity, though. But I do think I think I would ask, or I would encourage players to play a ball sport of some kind, right? Like, not that I don't love track and swimming; they're awesome, and I definitely have players that come from that. But I think playing a ball sport where you're reacting to space and a ball is just so helpful and transferable, even if it's volleyball.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think those are probably the best choices. I would say on the girls' side, I think if I had to choose, I would go with soccer in the fall, and then basketball in the winter, and then in the spring and summer in the U.S. we switched to rugby. I think those would probably be the most transferable when it comes to aerobic and space, and you sort of get something. You get a season with the ball at your feet, and a season with the ball in your hand, and so that's probably where we're at. But on the other hand, I hesitate to say it just because any sport could be transferable, and following your passion probably is the best thing. And even building muscle groups and new skills, even if it was swimming, so be it. But that works pretty well for me. On the boys' side, I think it's most common that you would find boys go from football to wrestling. That's probably the most. Jeff, I don't know if you have that in your high school and your high school kids. Is that a most commonly transferred sports or football and wrestling? And those ones are good. I'd say, but I wonder if there's other sports that would also be in a similar boat. Like for instance, soccer and hockey. If that would be that would be about as good. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, we draw mostly from the football and the wrestling team, but we do get a fair amount of hockey kids who don't necessarily want to go play lacrosse because it's so much like hockey. And one thing that we really like about the hockey kids is they come with a different ethos and a different ethic um, about about playing tough, being mentally tough. So I think that's one of the other things we haven't really addressed is it takes some stick to itiveness, some mental toughness, some persistence to make it through a rugby game because it is a lot of work and it's a lot of requires a lot of fitness and you got to keep moving and you have to do it for your mates and all that kind of stuff. And there aren't I think wrestling, even though it's an individual sport, they all practice together very intensely and they encourage each other very intensely. So they have that mental um, that mental focus and that mental persistence. I think football, they highly prize being tough and playing tough and being physical and not backing down and trying to physically dominate. And hockey, I think they just, although they're not as big and perhaps rough as some of the other sports, they are very, very, very tough. And they play 45 seconds at a time, and so they are out like a flash and they're moving fast and they want to make every motion count, and that takes a special kind of mental focus and grit. And so I think when I think about the kids who are most successful, they come from those sports because of how those sports are played, and the mental requirements of those sports translate very well to rugby. You see a lot of basketball players, as soon as they get really collided with, they're looking for the foul, or I'm not trying to denigrate basketball players. They just don't have it's more of a finesse game than it is a straight on play it out type game. So I hope I haven't denigrated any of the other sports and made them sound less aggressive. But I think that
Yeah.
from my experience, young guys who haven't played before, when they come and step on the field at Hendricken, um, we kind of know based on where they come from. The cross country guys aren't necessarily cut out for this sport, although they're very fit. They don't have the collision and they don't have that grit that you need to persist in some of the smelly, muddy, wet, uncomfortable things, particularly when you get in the pack. That's when you really find out who's uncomfortable. Wrestlers don't mind being in the pack at all because they are used to being at that close contact with other humans.
It is funny,
Yeah.
Jeff. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please go.
I was just going to say, you were talking about that, and I realized I was thinking about our boys' team, and I was thinking that some of our fly halves, our centers, our backs are most commonly a mixture of basketball and soccer. And that like our forwards are almost, like wrestlers in football. And that's not entirely true, but it's like it's much more true than I didn't even really realize that. But you can see that too, like one group being really comfortable with finding and putting people in space, and one group being much more comfortable with collision. Yeah, interesting. Huh.
I also like what you said earlier. I've never really thought about it this way. A game of rugby is a constant balance between uh, exerting as much effort as you can and recovering as quickly as you can, and exerting effort as hard as you can and recovering as quickly as you can. So a game of rugby is really sort of a careful balance between how high of discomfort you naturally do not even recognize, or are willing to just accept this as part of the game. And it becomes, sort of like the environment. It's the air. It's always there. It's the, if you are looking to be able to, if you're the type of player, the type of person that wants to be able to feel discomfort a little bit, and then move away from it. Like, if discomfort tells you that you're doing something wrong, and there's many finesse sports that's definitely the case. If you feel a lot of discomfort, you're doing it wrong. It's a sign that tells you that your technique is wrong. You're applying your biomechanics in a bad way. But I think a lot of the sports where the level of discomfort just ratchets up, and then maybe you have a chance to bring it back down. You're absolutely right. That type of personality, that type of a person that has experience with sports like that, or maybe it's in their personality that they enjoy that balance, or finding
Well,
that balance.
the English have this great idiom that some people like it when it's argy bargy. Some people, when I talk to my wife about missing playing, it's not that I have any great thoughts in my mind about any great play I ever had. I just miss the contact, and I miss that exhilaration, and I miss just the wrestling it out with people, and
Yep.
fighting for the ball, and all those types of things. All the argy bargy stuff I wish I could still do, because it's almost like whenever you're watching a prize fight or something, you find yourself almost shadow boxing.
Right,
It's the same
right.
kind of thing when I watch a rugby match. I feel my body trying to get in there and wanna get the contact.
Right, and think about the times that you, or I don't know how it is for you, but when I think of the times that that I remember most vividly of having a lot of fun in rugby, it was maybe we didn't score, it broke down the game a little bit, but it was those muddy, rainy, warm, because Newport can be just brutal when it's just, the rain just comes sideways at you, and it's just really cold and it's pelting you. But those warm, rainy, muddy days, those were brilliant. I have just such great memories. I ruined the car afterwards, whether it was practice or a game. Those were just so much fun. I absolutely love those. And it's not for everybody. It's messy, it's ugly. But yeah, where it's argy bargy, and it's just, rubble, tossling complete, every second of the game. Or whether it's just really messy, and it's just covered in mud, and whose sweat is this on me? That's something that I always, it
Yeah.
was the funnest times in my life.
There's another part of this, and I'm upfront about it when I coach, and particularly when I talk to the forwards, because I'm a big guy, and I'm usually the biggest guy even today when I'm over there on a pitch and I'm looking around, even with a lot of men's clubs. So, and when I'm talking about I'm talking to the young guys and trying to get them to get over their fear. I tell them, and this is very truthful, there was never a time when I was getting ready for a match when I wasn't afraid. Just getting ready for the match, that anticipation for the match, the thought in my head I could get hurt. Mostly because, I'm the biggest guy on the pitch, but there was a bigger guy. There was a guy as big usually, or close to my size on the other side. And he and I would always make eye contact before the game with this notion that we're going to have it out. And so there's a little notion of fear. There always was a little notion of fear. And part of what I really I cherish about rugby is that I had that fear every time I went to play. I got over that fear every time I went to go start to play, and it didn't last past the kickoff. But it was always there, and I could easily have said, you know what, today's not the day I'm going out on the field, because I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to hurt somebody else. But I always walked through the fear, and I felt prouder when I walked off the pitch because I had gone through that thing that I was afraid of. And I'm a big guy, so I can imagine how the smaller guys feel when they see all these big beefy guys running around and running at them.
We just hope we can run away from you.
Yeah.
That's our primary goal.
I know, but
we're going to
part
keep
of it
going
is,
until you guys collapse, gasping to keep up. That's our hope.
you see that particularly with new players, they really have to overcome that fear that there are some big bodies, there are some big collisions, but it's a thing that you need to walk through that fear, follow your training, do everything right and you're going to be okay and the other guy's going to be okay. And it's okay also to have that fear because it can be a pretty rough game.
So a couple of comments on that. The argy-bargy. So yes, pushing and shoving, I believe, is what we'd refer to that when we've been polite company. But yeah, there's a medical term, proprioceptive, and it's exactly that. It's related to the fact that. So you remember, well, when babies are born, they always teach you to swaddle them. I wrap them tight in a blanket, and that helps them sleep. That's a similar proprioceptive sort of a reaction that the babies have, and it helps settle and relax. And so when I did judo, I started finding out that bizarre as it may seem, but being thrown hard on a mat when you know how to land properly and therefore you don't instantly get hurt actually became very relaxing. And I used to joke to people that it would cause all my joints to pop open and then just snap back, in the correct place, like I was getting decent chiropractic service, which is obviously totally rubbish, by the way, but it made me feel good about it. But rugby has something similar, exactly as you're just saying, Jeff, that contact, it's proprioceptive contact. And once you're match fit, and that was the other point I was going to make, is the problem with any contact sport is when you're not match fit, you're not physically able to take those hits because your body's not ready for it, and the right muscle groups don't tense at the right moments, the right muscle groups don't relax at the right moments. You get hurt, and it's uncomfortable, and it's not fun. And I feel for your basketball players coming in because they have a different form of contact.
Yeah.
But those football players coming in who are used to that thump, once they get their body just tuned to the fact they don't have pads to diffuse it so much, they too fit in perfectly in that respect. And that's actually one of the slight concerns for football players, is just helping them rein it back in when they start playing rugby. But yeah, it's a no medical thing. It's and argy-bargy is a very good way of describing it. But yeah, it's proprioceptive, and it is relaxing, and it takes tension out of you, and and it relates back to being squeezed tight in the womb. Dr. McLeod in the house.
Wow.
Who knew?
I'll stay
That
with
was something you said.
instead of swaddling.
That's right. So your T-shirt can say, rugby is not only is it more important than education, but it helps you relax.
Right. I almost wanted to save what I'm about to say for the end, but I'm going to say it now. Because, just going back 10 minutes ago, when one of the things you mentioned, Jeff, is that some of the behaviors that kids learn in a different sport, and you mentioned basketball, a behavior of when you get fouled, when somebody hits you, you stop and you look at the ref and say, where's my foul? And I think a lot of people would say soccer has some of that as well, and that's true, and that's behavior that sort of has to get trained out of a rugby player when they switch over. But they do those players from other sports are learning other skills that translate really well to rugby, and they so they've got to get trained out. One thing that I've said on this podcast before that I still believe very strongly is that a basketball player who tends to foul a lot is the type of player that ends up switching over to rugby and being really successful, right? A basketball player that's really aggressive and spends a lot of time with 4, 5, or 6 fouls is a type of kids that I've seen be successful in rugby. But one thing I want to say too is that no matter what other sport you play in, you can have skills that transfer, and you can be successful in rugby. And even if you don't play any other sport at all, you can be successful in rugby, and you'll certainly be welcomed in rugby. So this isn't to say that you need to play other sports, but I think one of the conversations we've had is what sports are applicable, what sports do we see and have experience transferring over. But some athletes come out of nowhere and maybe haven't played a sport before, or haven't played a sport that we'd expect would transfer, and they end up being phenomenal rugby players. And a lot of that just has to do with intestinal fortitude, aggression, a sort of scrappiness that they have that maybe you don't see. And we've talked a lot about some of those behaviors earlier, but just worth mentioning there, especially the part where I think I said in the previous one is like, if you want to recruit a rugby player from a basketball game, go find the kid that's fouled out. That's your rugby player.
And truth be told, Chris, basketball actually was my sport in high school. I wasn't allowed to play football because my mom didn't have insurance. So I played basketball, but I played it like a football player.
So you were that kid fouled out the whole time,
I
I'm
was.
guessing.
We call it working the low post.
Yeah. So you ran around with one hand permanently up in the air and the other hand on the ball or on the
Yep.
person or whatever.
Yep.
Got it. That's the end of my basketball knowledge, by the way.
I'll just add to that you know, when I started playing rugby, the woman that was at the time like a junior when I was a freshman in college, she had been a competitive cheerleader for all of, you know, like all of growing up and through high school, and then transitioned to rugby, and she was my like big rugger or whatever when I transitioned to playing college rugby. And I just loved that she, you know, like you can come from anywhere. You can just be a person that's dedicated to doing something athletic and play something else, you know? So.
Yeah,
just to
for sure. I could see
support
that
Chris's
too. We
point.
didn't talk about it. Yeah, gymnastics would probably be a good one. Similar, right? Anybody who's got grit and intensity is going to be quite successful.
That's
You
true
know,
for most sports, though, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
And then
I think
also maybe just to repeat something that Chris, I think you said off air, was just that idea that like I think everyone, or there's so much research out there that says that we want kids to be playing multiple sports and not specializing in even the best sport in the world, which is rugby. You know, like there's such value in getting different lessons and seeing different coaches and seeing different fields and courts and games and bringing that back to rugby. So it's worth playing other sports.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And also, I mean, a big part of that is try to reduce overuse injuries from playing the same sport 4 years in a row. But yeah, and the same thing also goes for friends, right? New friends, new teammates. One of the things I would say about learning a new sport is that I think is really helpful. Think about as you progress. So, you know, if you're gonna progress in a sport like rugby, you know, you're gonna play at the youth level, and maybe you play flag, and then you move up to tackle, and it's kind of like new skills and new people, and it's a new challenge. And you move up to high school, and it's a new skills and new people and new challenge, and then college, and I think there's a tremendous you know, there's a tremendous transfer of experience when you've tried something new before, or where you got out of your comfort zone and played a sport that you never played before, because it sort of you know, opens you to trying new things and succeeding when there's uncertainty in front of you, and builds confidence. And so that's part of the story as well.
So it sounds like basically our conclusion is it doesn't matter what sport you played. It'll help you a little bit at rugby, if not a lot at rugby. And then once you've played rugby, you'll be better at every other sport, but you wouldn't want to go back in any case.
Oh yeah.
That's a perfect summary.
Wow, we've got to just cut to the chase, guys.
Yeah.
We can save so much time.
Yeah. Why did we spend all
Yeah.
this time, you know, beating around the bush? Right? That's fantastic. Well, that was a great summary. Does anybody have anything else? Have we gotten to the bottom of this one just yet?
I'm good.
I'm happy.
We're good. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and call it an episode. This is a lot of fun to sit around and chat and consider a lot of these things. I didn't you know, I didn't think about some of the things that you guys mentioned the way that you said it, because I think I was too ready to think about it in the way that Alan just summarized it perfectly. But it was great to hear. All right, with nothing else said, then that's fantastic. So we'll just say good night to everybody then.
Thanks.
All right,
Good night.
thank you
Right,
guys.
thank you.
All right, good night.